Now, think about what happens every time a person clicks on a post. And in fact, no matter how many times I refresh the page, and if hundreds of people are accessing this post, think about what happens. In our routes file, right here, we build up a path, we check to see if the file exists, and if it does, we fetch the contents of that file, and then we pass it to the view. So that means if all at once 10,000 people read your post, you would call file get contents 10,000 times. Even though very likely after the post is done, it may never change again. You might revise it a month later, but for all intents and purposes, it's a one and done post. So with that in mind, it's a shame that we have to access the file system every time you access this page. Why don't we instead cache it? Caching allows us to effectively avoid some expensive operation by instead storing it in memory. Now, Laravel makes this really easy. We can say cache remember, and we need to give it a key, and this should be a unique key for that post. Well, how about post.slug? That will always be unique. Next, how long should we cache it? You might do it for an hour, you might do it for a day, you might even do it forever. For now, I'm going to do it for 5 seconds just so we can quickly see the cache expiring. And then we give it a function here. Okay, so now I'm going to move this up here and return it. The only problem is we need access to path, but we're inside of a closure here. I'll show you 2 ways to deal with that. First, the traditional way is to simply use the variable, and now you can access it. What gets returned here will be returned from the remember function, so I can store it like this. And we should now be good to go. So check it out. I'm going to var dump file get contents just so you can see when we call this function and when we don't. All right, let's come back to Firefox. I'm going to give it a refresh. And remember, right now, there's nothing in the cache. So there's file get contents, but if I run it again, nope, we don't access it. We pull from the cache. The 5 seconds has now expired, so we see it again. So refresh, and it's back. And I keep refreshing. It's in the cache. It's in the cache. It's in the cache. It's not in the cache. And again, that's because it's a very short expiration. In real life, if we're dealing with seconds, you might say, well, if there's 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour, well, if you wanted to cache for an hour, we could do it for 3,600 seconds. Another little helper here, you don't have to remember, but if you want, you could say now add hour, or add day, or add days, or add weeks. It's everything you'd want. Add minutes. So often if you want to say, well, just cache this for 20 minutes, I won't normally do something like this. Instead, I'll just say now add minutes 20. Otherwise, be sure to add it in seconds. Okay, so this is useful. And again, a little tip, if you're using PHP 7.4 or higher, you can swap this out with a short closure or arrow functions. And if you're using something like PHP Storm, you should be able to do that automatically. And that cleans it up a bit. Now, at this point, you might do a little bit of cleanup. Like you might want to declare the variable inline. Some people like to do that. You might want to bring this up on its own line. And you end up with something along these lines. Okay, we're making really good progress. Think about how much you've learned already. You've learned about basic routing and views. You've learned about constraints. You've learned about working with the file system. You've learned about redirects. You've learned about wildcards. You've learned about caching. There's so much information here. We haven't even touched a database yet, so we're only getting started. In the next lesson, well, we're still hard coding all of these posts. It sounds like we need to make that part dynamic as well.